I have a friend, another Northamptonian. I'm working my way through the county, who currently resides in Canada. And it's a really, really interesting career journey. And like possibly she's done it all in terms of what you can do. So please, I'd like to introduce Karen Walsh. Hi, Karen.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Firstly, obviously, thank you for taking the time. We are obviously a little bit time different. You're early doors, and I'm lunchtime. And so I know you're busy. I know you're doing things, and we'll get straight into it. I just ever so quickly, I just want to say, I've realised that with Brian, I worked with Brian. I did the intro with Brian. With Sheena, sort of never said how we met, but that's for a different pod. But I mean, we sort of know just because of Brian, right? Mainly because we overlap work-wise, sort of. But you worked for Brian or with Brian, and I guess we'll get round to that. But just want to start with the first question, just to kind of give the audience an idea of what they're not. So, where did you grow up? Where would you consider? Well, where did you grow up? Where would you have originally considered home? And where's home now?
Okay. So like many people these days, you end up moving around quite a bit. But I was brought up in Suffolk, so I'm an East Anglian Suffolk girl. That's where I consider home. Did a little bit of my sixth form schooling in Colchester, North Essex. So there's a little bit of a Suffolk-Essex border thing going on there. So that's my background, is farming country, and a lot of family around, and grew up in that area surrounded by family. It's lovely. University was Cardiff, so I went off to Wales, and absolutely great experience in the rain for the 3 years. There's a particular fine drizzle that you encounter as a student in Cardiff, without a car, without a bike, and you're walking around everywhere. It's never particularly cold, but boy, do you get wet. So that was university. And I ended up then doing my pre-reg and applied through the Boots system. So did my pre-reg with Boots at the time, and moved up to Chester. So was in Cheshire for a couple of years doing the pre-reg, and then staying with Boots once I qualified. Moved around a little bit more. So it was in Swindon for a little bit, with Leighton's for a couple of years, and then found my way over.
I never knew with Leighton's. No, when would be Leighton?
That would have been about 99 to just over 2000, 2001.
Okay. Yeah. So
it was in a practice in the old town of Swindon.
Yeah, I worked in that practice.
Really enjoyed that. It's a nice practice. I'd been there for years. It was a family-owned practice that had sold into the group. And the original owner and optometrist was still working there sort of 1 day a week. It was very nice, very family feeling. Yeah, and then they got an opportunity to move over towards the Northampton side of things, and ended up working at Brian's place. So that's where my time at Brian started, and that's where I was always moving towards wanting to do more contact lenses. So I was always on the lookout for that. At the time, Leighton's gave me more opportunities than the Boots situation and setup had done, because they were using contact lens opticians. And then obviously moving into somewhere where contact lenses are front and center every single day of the practice philosophy at Brian's was an absolute joy, and was a very lucky find. So he was looking for someone at the time. I was able to come fill that gap. It worked out really well. Okay, so I did that for a number of years. And you and I actually, I think, although the practice has been seriously upgraded and refitted over time, I think you and I probably sit in the same consulting room, or at least.
So I'm like, it depends who's in the building. So because I was last in, right? So Brian's there, obviously, then Deborah's there. So I'm last in. So I go wherever there is a spare chair, and luckily I can make that work. But Brian's got his consulting room; it will always be his consulting room, and Deborah is in. It's known as Deborah's consulting room, and I just found.
You just get whatever's left.
Yeah, whatever's left. You know what? That's really interesting, because I knew you had the Suffolk kid, but I thought you'd been in like Northampton for like years and years and years and years. I didn't realise that it was later that you ended up,
Yeah,
because your parents are in Northamptonshire now as well.
they
So,
moved down after I moved up there. So they actually moved out of East Anglia, and they've now been in the Northampton area for ages. Because of that, but so because time goes by, doesn't it? But yeah, no, I was in Northampton from 2001 to 2015. Eventually, when we left to come to Canada. But Brian's place lasted to about 2007. Yeah. So from there, I got an opportunity talking to another.
wait, you're going too
What?
quick. You're flying. You're flying. I've got to break you up a little bit.
What would you like
You're
to know? Where shall I pause?
No, so the one question I want actually to ask is, did you always want to be an optom?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, all right, we can
Yeah.
go back to that bit. Yeah. So I share, whenever I do teaching with students at the university kind of situation, I share a bunch of pictures of me when I was little. And it starts off with a cute baby photograph. We've all got those. And then it goes on to a kind of cute toddler in glasses. And I started in glasses when I was 18 months old. And my dad apparently noticed that I wasn't really paying attention. If he came into the room pretty quietly, I wouldn't turn to look at him. And he was trying to figure out, was it my hearing? Was it my eyesight? So he was pretty switched on, got both tested, and they realized it was my eyesight. So yeah, I'm super myopic. And I have obviously a pathological myopia. It went about a diopter with every year of life up until the age of about 13, 14. And I've now crept up. It's sort of obviously slowed down hugely at that point, but I've now crept up to about a -16 or so with a 125, 150 still. So that early experience shaped this kind of interest in, first of all, hospital optometry. I was in and out of that as a tiny kid. And then our local in Ipswich, it would have been our local family optometrist there. And I was in and out of there, every 3 months, every 6 months, and then eventually every 12 months. They fitted me with my first contact lenses, RGPs, and I wore those. I had my first pair of RGPs, Kea, single pair that I did not lose, did not scratch too badly, or they got polished. It was okay. I had that single pair for 7 years. I wouldn't do it these days.
Doesn't
Would we?
happen now.
7 years.
Doesn't
I
happen
know.
now.
Got my money's worth out of those. But yeah, it was always going to be optometry for that. And then because of that, going into contact lenses, and honestly, it's a completely classic story, but it made me feel so much more confident, and it allowed me to see much more clearly. Then it was like, they're life changing, right? I want to be able to work in an area that's doing that for as many people as possible. So absolutely, it's a very standard journey, but it is fundamentally what drives me.
I mean, I wouldn't call it standard, but I mean, I've met a lot of optometrists who maybe didn't always want to be optometrists, and they've kind of fallen into that path because, maybe they wanted to go down the medical field and they enjoyed it, or they've shared, a lot of people who've shared that kind of experience of knowing a good optometrist. I mean, you're the first optometrist I've met who was in glasses at 18 months. And that's new to me. I like mad props for your dad, to kind of fuck and go, something's not quite 100%, because you know what it's like. You get some parents, and they don't see it. They just assume it's kids and kids being normal and things like that. And then you kind of surprise them with, oh, actually your child needs specs. And sometimes they can be really broken up by it. But why didn't I realize? Or I thought little Timmy was just trying to crave a bit of attention, kind of thing. So that is really impressive. I don't know if I would notice that with my kids, but then I just fob them off on Deborah and get Deborah to check their eyes regularly. Therefore, I don't have to step in. So who would you say is like your, like, to become an optometrist? Would you say that there was one person who kind of inspired you, or was it just the journey that made you feel that this is where you wanted to be? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was pretty sort of self-aware that this was what I wanted to do. And I had my school kind of saying, "Are you sure it's not medicine? Do you want to consider something else? Make sure you look at other careers and other options," which is fair. And I just kept coming back. It's like, I want to do this. So I knew. And then along the way, I had those little stepping stones again, nicely laid out sort of in the UK education system. But, at high school, you're doing work experience. I was able to do that in this Ipswich based independent optometrist that I'd been to, for my entire childhood. So loved being in that environment. That was a real old school setup again, a family established optometry practice. And then once I started at Cardiff, coming back every summer, there was a different independent optometrist in Ipswich who would take me on as a, summer help. So that was Peter Gerber's. They were brilliant as well, and let me sort of just, it's when people have that passion for bringing other people on and, come and sit in the examination. If you've got permission for the patient, come and help with this dispense. You weren't just standing there making cups of tea and taking the post out or something. So I was sort of helped nicely through that. But I did know I wanted to do it, and I did know that it needed to be contact lenses.
Yeah, that. I still don't know what I want to do. I haven't figured it out yet. So I'm trying lots of things. So here we are podcasting, talking to my friends. But that's really cool. We got you to Brian. Then was there? So quick question: do you still see patients now?
So I do not know. So I have not seen patients in a normal practice setup since I stopped at Brian's, which would have been 2007 timeframe. I have had a period which we'll get to, doing some clinical research, so seeing study participants. So I've been able to be hands-on clinically again for a bit, but right now I don't. And it's interesting you saying you're still not sure, what you want to be doing, right? As much as I have always been convinced that it needed to be optometry and contact lenses, the thing that I didn't know for me was, well, what does that look like? Because as I was going through, you get qualified, you get into practice, you want to do enough that you feel competent with your daily life and practice, right? That for me, it's like passing your driving test. You're not a good driver straight away, right? You've got to go out and get the experience. I really wanted to do that clinically. But I did know actually also quite early on, I probably didn't see myself continuing to feel, for me, properly fulfilled just being in practice. I considered taking on, if I took on practice ownership, right, you've got all of the different challenges that come with building a practice, building a business, looking after staff and training people. I knew that option was there and would be really fulfilling. It didn't feel like a good fit for me. Okay. But I knew I didn't want to only be coming into clinic every day working for someone else and seeing patients. So that also was true. So I did start some other possibilities. I accepted a PhD actually at Aston. I was going to go off and do a PhD, and the funding fell through at the very last minute, and that sort of set that timeline back. And in the middle of that sort of timeline being very uncertain and nothing actually being able to happen with this PhD that I was going to go back and do after being in practice for years, I ended up talking to a mutual friend of ours, so Jonathan Bench. So we were at university together a year apart. He'd just gone from practice into an industry position. He started working for a company as a contact lens buyer. I didn't even know that kind of role existed. And I was fascinated to hear the opportunity that he was getting from doing that and the change in his sort of look in optometry. And it was really that conversation that inspired me to think, well, what else could I do? I'd already done some sort of volunteering teaching at Aston in the contact lens course for a year. It helped out there. And, so I knew I was looking for something. And then I did that classic thing. It was after a BCLA, which was when I'd had this conversation with Jonathan. Flicked through Optician, opened it up from the back, looked at the jobs in the back pages first before you look at anything else, as we used to do. And at that point, J&J were advertising for a part-time professional affairs consultants. So these were people that they hadn't really done it like this before, but they were looking to take on people to go co-travel with their sales reps and just kind of had these conversations, personal experience with other optometrists in practice. And really because of that conversation with Jonathan, and because I knew I was looking for something different, well, maybe I could do that. Maybe I'll try that.
Yeah.
So none of that stuff was really planned out. It was sort of, I guess I was open to the opportunity. So that would be a recommendation for anyone listening, right? Just be open to stuff. But it wasn't a career plan. It was let's go and see. And from there, things really did change for me. And yeah, it absolutely did work out. So I did a little bit of part-time work, carried on with Brian's place, started with J&J for a sort of half a week in each. And then was able to join a year later J&J full-time in professional affairs. And so that for me was a bit like, I feel maybe now like I'm home. I feel like this is the thing I probably want to be doing. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it was like for you, Karen. I mean, we're not too far apart. We're a couple of years different in terms of graduation and that. But when we were at uni, you went to university and you left as an optometrist. And when I was at uni, they didn't really talk about the kind of ancillary aspect of eye care profession, the potential other options you've got, beyond sitting in a room and seeing patients. And so, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this. And I wanted to talk to my friends. I know people who've had some great journeys, just so that people can say, well, look, there are different things for you to do if consulting room work is not for you, or you're a bit bored of it, or you just want to do something different. And you made a really great point there. You just had to be open to change, which I think that can be tough. Particularly, as you get a bit older and you start to think, okay, maybe if you're considering settling down and families and what have you, that being open to opportunities is how you end up in different places, which is great. So the question I would have asked is, was there like a canon event? Like they say in the comics, a canon, like a mega event that made you decide you didn't want to see patients. But I think you've already answered it. It was just more a case of it didn't feel like home, and something that was not really something you wanted to do for 40 years. But you wanted to be with it, but you still enjoyed the eye care profession. It was just, how do you sidestep into something that was a bit different, which is, that's amazing. So from Brian to J&J, and then how did you end up in Canada?
So J&J was fantastic. It was the biggest learning curve, that full step out of practice and into industry, into commercial business conversations, fully educating your peers and thinking, hang on, I've got to be confident to be able to bring something useful to this group of very experienced people in front of me. So tons of stuff and learning there. Great support within J&J to do that. I then that was life stage that took us to Canada. So at the time, it was 2 young kids, juggling part-time work in J&J, which was fine and very supportive of that. But this opportunity came up to come over to Canada to what was the CCLR, got renamed to the Centre for Ocular Research and Education at the University of Waterloo. So it's about an hour outside of Toronto. We're on the east coast of Canada. CCLR was originally started by Des Swan, and it then been taken over as he retired by Lyndon Jones. So I knew these people well, knew the output of the organisation well. It's a similar setup to Eurolens in Manchester, right? Clinical research, fundamentally often in contact lenses and other areas. And they had a couple of openings for clinical researchers. And as much as I knew I didn't want to be in practice for the rest of my career, nothing against, rolling my sleeves up and picking up a slit lamp again and learning, reminding myself how to drive it and seeing study participants. And at J&J, we'd been using, the output from clinical research centres, for our studies, for our clinical data all the time. So to come back to learn that side of it, which I hadn't ever done, it's a funny career journey. Again, most people did anything would do an academic thing. And if you're going to end up in industry, you sort of end up there. I took a step back, but it allowed me work-life balance. So It allowed a new adventure for the whole family to come to a new country. It helped with managing my time and my hours. Sort of academic work hours fitted in really well with kids and daycare and school and things. And I got to learn all these new skills that I, again, hadn't planned to do. But clinical study design, writing protocols, writing up final reports, seeing study participants, understanding ethics boards and the applications and how you're meant to look after these volunteers that come through clinical studies, and doing the right thing and following all those rules. So the discipline of that is something that I had no understanding of before I started and was able to learn. So that was fantastic. I got to lead a couple of studies, got to be investigator on many, many more. And then while I was there, because the original CCLR, which is very contact lens focused, got renamed quite deliberately to the Centre for Ocular Research and Education, that was reflecting just diversifying for them, looking for different sources of funding. Clinical research is fundamental, but they also had a really good laboratory in bioscience and material science capabilities in laboratory. So they wanted to reflect that. And they also had an education aspect to what they were doing. And so, there's Linda, many of the other people who've worked there over the years always were getting invited to come out to do talks in education. And I ended up being able to take that education arm on to lead it. So I was the leader for the education third of that organisation. And then we were able to grow that. So we did typical standard education things. It would come, a few of us would get invited to go out and speak. That's fine. But then we were also expanding into either writing clinical articles with our own names on it, medical writing, which is a really sought after field, really, because there's never enough people who can do that. And you're often then, if you're medical writing, you're writing for people that don't have time to do the writing themselves. But you need the knowledge and the skills to be able to do that writing. So we would offer those services. We would offer translating of complex clinical study data and results and findings from papers into simple stuff. So simple take-homes that you could use in practice, maybe infographics, maybe make it visual. And we really found, I found a lovely sort of combination, bringing together, I suppose, all my experiences to that point, so the education stuff from J&J, the clinical study research stuff that I'd learned, and then putting it together. Cool. That was a really enjoyable time. And one of the key times within that was COVID, because of course all the clinical study, the research had to shut down. We were all working from home, as everyone was, for a period of time. But during that time, we were, and I was lucky to be involved in writing a couple of really important papers around contact lenses and their safety with COVID. There was some stuff in the news that came out quite early on. People were concerned whether you could or couldn't wear your contact lenses. So we had a group of us got together, Phil Morgan, Jason Nichols, Linda, Mark Wilcox. We pulled all the evidence together really quickly and said, well, is there any evidence here that we need to be worried or not? So we had that work that came out, and then we took a great deal of time translating the peer review paper that went into Clay into stuff that was really easy to understand. And we were ending up giving interviews on TV. We had loads of information and graphics and things. So that really did push us forward into something I think that felt pretty useful at the time, actually, for the industry. So very proud of that work. I'm very proud of the team that worked really hard behind the scenes to make that happen as well.
Yeah, just if you're within the industry, you know about Core and some of the great stuff they do. And they're always for me personally, those infographics and things like that are great. I can sit and I can read a clinical paper, don't particularly enjoy it. So if someone else does the hard work and makes it into something bite-sized, it just makes life easier, particularly because, with my current role, obviously, seeing patients and then theoretically running a business, sometimes it's easier if someone does spoon feed you. And I think Core in that sense has been great. I've really, really built good relationships. There's something I'm going to ask you now, and we might come back to it later, just listening to your journey so far. And I say this with partially my BCLA membership committee chair hat on. Would you say building relationships within the industry has helped you progress your career? Does that make sense? Like, you'd spoken to JB at BCLA and you dropped in BCLA, and then because of that, you knew Lyndon and all these, Kamlesh and all these big professional guys. Would you say it's important to make friends in the industry when you're looking to diversify?
Yeah, 100%. We're still a small community, right? People know each other. Or if you don't, there's someone in the middle who knows the other person and you can get an introduction. So yes, incredibly important for me and how this journey has happened. If I go back to Brian's and the contact lens exposure for clinical practice was important, but also he'd been asked to write a couple of papers on early silicone hydrogels back in the day when they first came out. And I helped him, on those and got my name on those. And you sort of start to think, well, these things are possible. But you're right. And then from there, you go to BCLA and then you start to meet some of these speakers. I used to think these speakers, who were the Prasit Daves and David Rustons and were these wonderful people. And you sort of think, I wish I love what they do. I could never do that myself. And then you realize you end up starting to work for them or with them and you get their mentorship and you get their help. Growing the business at Core for the education angle, that was a lot of reaching out to people that I met and knew along the way from different contact lens companies. Is there anything else that we can do as offering you an educational service to help? And so yeah, it's a very relationship driven business for sure. But I say if you've got those, they're important. It's helpful to be out at conference to make them. And if you haven't got them, then I bet you someone that already does, right? So because it is still that small and sort of closely knit, particularly the people who are proactive in areas that you might be interested in, right? They will tend to be out there online or at conference and show up, right? So it becomes, if you're open to it and if you're looking for it, I think you can do your best to make those things happen.
I think we're very lucky, in my experience, in that our fellow professionals are pretty nice. So if you do reach out to them, I mean, there have been times I've reached out to Lyndon and Phil. And I know Phil, we meet a couple of times. We're always friendly. I know Sarah, we say hello. And a couple of times a year, we'll run into each other at conferences and stuff like that. There's been times I've just reached out and got, dear Phil, dear Lyndon, dear Karen, I've got this query. Can you help me? And they've just gone, yeah, sure. Right. And I think that is it's so nice. It's really family kind of feeling sometimes where people, when they can help you out, will help you out. And the nice thing about all of that is sometimes, as you get to know them better, they will spoon feed you. But if you are in that journey, they'll kind of guide you. Rather than spoon feeding you into this, why don't you look at this? And why don't you look at that? And then you can make your decisions about what you do, which is great, which is really nice. So where are you now? Well, how did you end up back in professional services?
So one of the realities, I was going to say it's an oddity. It's not. It's just how it is, and ultimately by choice. One of the things about my background is I don't have a higher degree. I followed all of the modules, the City University Masters many, many years ago back in the day. But timing worked out. I didn't quite finish that. So I have the postgraduate clinical diploma, but I don't have the Masters. And equally, I don't have a PhD. So to stay in an academic role at the University of Waterloo, I would have needed to have gone through and ticked at least one of those boxes. If you're in academia, understandably, you need to sort of show that progress. And again, I think I sort of decided and knew fairly early on in my time here that there was a point where I needed to make that decision, and I decided not to do that. And really at that point, I knew that I would end up back in industry. It was then, but there was no hurry to do so. And it was then just a question of when it felt right and when the right opportunity came along. For me, that was now 3.5 years ago now.
Really?
That opportunity came along. It's 3.5 years, yeah. It has gone quickly. And then I was able to explore an opportunity with Cooper Vision. And that's where I now am and still am. So I'm fortunate I get to work from home, haven't needed to leave Waterloo. So the kids have carried on with the friendships and the schools that they've been used to. But I get to work in this global team of really super sharp people who are fantastic marketers who look after the products that we have from everything. Cooper Vision, of course, does a bit of one day FRP, fundamentally known for that. We've got a myopia management division, of course, and a specialty division. So we work across the whole remit of that. So we've got a very busy people and busy teams, as any a large company would have at those kind of levels. And very fortunate to get an opportunity to come back in and do a professional affairs, professional services role in that situation. So that's what I spend my time doing day to day now. Yeah. I have got a little thought for you, actually.
Go on.
Today, exactly today, the 11th of March, is my 10-year anniversary of arriving in Canada.
Happy anniversary. Congratulations.
It's an official decade, and that feels like it's gone very, very quickly.
Time flies. Time does fly. I mean, I feel like I've known you. I feel like I've not known you that long, but I also feel like I've known you for ages, just based on conversations we've had. And it's a good thing, right? Means you're having fun if time's flying.
Well, and one thing we haven't mentioned is you are my optometrist. So you still are. I still consider you my optometrist, even though we live in different countries. And I do occasionally panic and get you to look at the back of my eyes, don't I?
Yeah. I'm figuring out why yet, but yeah, you do, and it's nice. I mean,
someone's got to do it.
Someone's got to do it. You're right. It's always a pleasure, Karen. I do love when we get to catch up, which is just BCNA will catch up, and then randomly, somewhere it'll happen. I'm going to finish now because we've kind of hit the 30-minute mark, and it's just the aim of this is to be a bit, not to be hour-long, epic. And so if you were to give a single piece of advice to anyone listening or watching, and I said to Brian and I said to Sheena, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be optometry related, can be, but you gave a really nice piece of advice that you dropped in about being open to things, which I thought was really great. But what would you say in terms of, let's say, professional development? What advice would you give people?
The thing that's always worked for me is following the thing that deep inside lights you up. So what's that passion? What's the thing that you could just see yourself wanting to keep doing more of? So for me, I've said it a number of times, it's contact lenses. For other people, that could be many, many different things, specific within optometry or something else. I heard someone the other day talk, for them, it was about people development. So that for them, it was running a business, running a team and watching people develop and grow. But whatever thing is that speaks to you, that gives you the fire more than anything else, I think if you can figure out what that is, and then be open to opportunities, then it feels like it opens doors. The other thing I would add to that is don't worry about having it all planned out, right? Take decisions and answers and choices. Even if it's not the thing that you end up doing forever and it works out for the rest of your career, it could open another door. It probably will open another door, and you'll certainly learn something along the way, right? So I personally haven't encountered it, and I haven't seen it in many of my sort of peers and colleagues where it feels like you've made a wrong decision. I don't think it's possible. Just make a decision, and follow that path.
Yeah, fantastic. I can't agree more. Make a decision. Sitting still doesn't achieve anything. So I'm going to thank you again, Karen. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I am going to stop recording.